Sagittarius, good afternoon, and welcome to your tarot reading for this Tuesday, the 30th of June, 2026 reading. I hope you're doing well. So let's go ahead and get started. There's a restlessness in you right now that has nothing to do with impatience. It's deeper than that, more structural. It's the feeling of a plant whose roots have outgrown the pot, pressing against the walls of a container that held them perfectly well for a long time, but has become almost overnight impossibly small. You can feel the edges, you can feel the compression. Every morning you wake up and the life you're living feels a little tighter than it did the day before, a little more restrictive, a little more like wearing someone else's clothes and pretending they fit when every movement reminds you that they don't. And you've been telling yourself it's fine. You've been adjusting. Tucking yourself in. Folding down the parts that stick out. Making accommodations for a space that no longer accommodates you. But something in the deepest part of your knowing, something that has been whispering for weeks and is now starting to speak at full volume, is telling you that the adjusting is over, the folding is done. You are leaving, not in some distant, theoretical, when the time is right kind of way. Soon, so soon that the life you're living right now, the routines you're walking through, the spaces you're occupying, the roles you're performing, all of it is already in the process of becoming a memory. You just haven't caught up to that fact yet because your body is still standing in the room, even though your spirit walked out of it a while ago. I need you to understand something about the nature of this departure before I go any further, because I think there's a misconception sitting in your energy that could interfere with what's unfolding. You're not leaving because something is wrong. You're not running from damage or escaping a crisis or fleeing a situation that has become unbearable. If that were the case, you would have left already. You would have left months ago. The urgency of crisis creates its own momentum. What's happening here is different. You're leaving because you've completed something. There's a cycle that began long before you were conscious of it. A cycle of learning, of growing, of extracting every drop of wisdom and experience and transformation that this current chapter of your life had to offer, and that cycle has reached its natural conclusion. Not its dramatic conclusion, its quiet one, the kind where you look around and realize that the room isn't broken, the room is fine, you're just not supposed to be in it anymore. The room was a classroom and the course is over, and continuing to sit at the desk doesn't make you a better student. It just makes you someone who's afraid to walk into the hallway and discover what's next. There are two people in this situation, two distinct energies, two separate presences that are both connected to this transition you're about to make, and they're playing very different roles. I want to talk about them individually because I think understanding who they are and what they represent is going to be critical for how you navigate the next 24 hours. These aren't abstract energies or vague spiritual presences. These are real people, people you know. People whose faces you could identify right now if you let your mind go quiet and stopped overthinking which two I'm referring to. You already know. Some part of you has already matched these descriptions to faces before I've even finished describing them. Trust that instinct. It's correct. The first person is someone who is tied to the place you're leaving. They're woven into the fabric of your current situation so tightly that thinking about departure automatically triggers thoughts about them. This person is not the reason you're staying, but they are the reason leaving feels complicated. Because leaving doesn't just mean changing your circumstances. It means changing the proximity between you and this person. And that proximity, however difficult or imperfect the relationship might be, has become a kind of gravity. Not the healthy kind that holds planets in orbit, the heavy kind, the kind that pulls you downward rather than holding you steady. This person's presence in your life has become synonymous with the life itself, so much so that you've started to confuse the container with the connection, as if leaving the situation means leaving them, and leaving them means losing something you're not sure you can afford to lose. But here's what I need you to see about this person, and I want you to really let this penetrate because I think you've been avoiding looking at it directly. This person needs you to stay more than you need to stay. The benefit of your continued presence in this situation is not equally distributed. You are giving more than you're receiving. You have been giving more than you've been receiving for a long time, and the imbalance has become so normalized that you've stopped recognizing it as imbalance. You've started interpreting your own depletion as the natural cost of loyalty. You've started telling yourself that this is just what commitment looks like, that real love or real friendship or real obligation requires this level of self-erasure, and anyone who told you otherwise just doesn't understand the depth of the bond. But depth without reciprocity is not depth, it's a hole, and you've been standing in it so long that you've forgotten what ground level looks like. This person, whether they realize it or not, has been relying on your willingness to fold yourself into a space that doesn't fit you. Your smallness serves them, not because they're cruel, not because they sat down one day and devised a plan to keep you contained, but because your expansion threatens the equilibrium they've built their comfort on. If you grow, the dynamic changes. If you leave, the dynamic collapses, and they can feel that. They can sense the tremors of your impending departure even if you haven't announced it, even if you haven't made a single concrete plan, even if the word leaving hasn't crossed your lips. Energy communicates what words withhold, and your energy has been broadcasting departure for weeks now, sending out a signal that this person's subconscious has been receiving and responding to with a gradually intensifying effort to keep things as they are. More requests for your time, more reasons you're needed, more subtle, almost invisible threads of obligation being woven around your ankles while you're not looking, not maliciously, desperately, the way someone holds tighter to a hand that's already pulling away. The second person is different, almost opposite. This person is not tied to where you are, they're tied to where you're going. They exist in the landscape of your next chapter, and their energy has been reaching back towards you across the threshold like a hand extended through a doorway you haven't walked through yet. You might already know who this person is, or you might not have met them yet in the way that matters, the way that reveals their significance. They might be someone you've had peripheral contact with, someone who has existed on the edge of your awareness without you registering their importance. Or they might be someone entirely new, someone whose entry into your life is timed to coincide with your departure from your current situation with a precision that will only become visible in retrospect. What I can tell you about this second person is that they carry an energy of expansion. Where the first person unconsciously needs you small, this person unconsciously invites you to be large. Their presence activates parts of you that have been dormant, ambitions you shelved, dreams you archived, versions of yourself that you mothballed because the current situation didn't have room for them. This person is like a key that fits locks you forgot you had, and when those locks open, what comes pouring out is going to surprise you, not because it's new, because it's old, because it's been waiting, because it's the full, uncompressed, unfolded version of you that has been living in storage while you made yourself small enough to fit a space that was never designed for someone your size. Now I want to talk about what's going to happen in the next 24 hours, because the energy around this is extremely concentrated, almost pressurized, like the air before a storm, where you can feel the electricity on your skin. Something is converging. Multiple threads that have been moving independently, each one seemingly unrelated to the others, are about to intersect at a single point. And that point of intersection is going to create a moment of clarity so sharp and so complete that the confusion you've been living in, the should I stay or should I go, the is it the right time, the what if I'm making a mistake, all of that confusion is going to evaporate like moisture on hot glass. You're going to see the full picture. Maybe for the first time, and the full picture is going to make the decision for you. Not by forcing your hand, but by making the right choice so blindingly obvious that choosing anything else would require you to actively ignore what's directly in front of your face. This convergence might take the form of a conversation. A conversation where someone says something, possibly something they didn't even intend to reveal, that gives you a piece of information you've been missing. A piece that completes a puzzle you've been staring at with 2/3 of the pieces in place, knowing the image was almost visible but not quite able to make it out. That missing piece arrives in the next 24 hours, and when it clicks into place, the picture that emerges is not ambiguous. It doesn't require interpretation. It doesn't leave room for maybe or it depends or let me think about it. It says go, clearly, unmistakably, with the authority of something that has been true for a long time and is only now being revealed because you're finally ready to act on it. Or the convergence might take the form of an event, something unexpected, something that disrupts the carefully maintained illusion that everything is fine where you are. An incident or a development or a revelation that pulls back the curtain you've been hiding behind and exposes the machinery of a situation you've been participating in without fully seeing. And what's behind the curtain isn't necessarily ugly or scandalous or dramatic. It might just be true. True in a way that you've been avoiding. True in a way that makes continued avoidance impossible. Because truth has weight, and when enough truth accumulates in a situation that has been sustained by partial awareness, the structure eventually buckles under the load. I want to talk about the financial dimension of this because it's not separate from the departure and it's not an afterthought. It's actually one of the primary mechanisms through which this transition is being facilitated. Money is involved, not in a peripheral, tangential, this might have some financial implications kind of way. In a central, load-bearing, this changes the economic architecture of your life kind of way. There is a financial development either already in motion or about to be set in motion that directly enables the departure your spirit has been planning. Because let's be honest about something that spiritual conversations often gloss over. One of the main reasons people stay in situations that no longer serve them is money. It's not always fear. It's not always attachment. Sometimes it's arithmetic. The numbers don't work. The practical logistics of leaving, the cost of starting over, the financial infrastructure required to support a new beginning, those things aren't just obstacles. They're walls. Real, measurable, non-negotiable walls that no amount of positive thinking can vault you over if the resources aren't there. And the resources are arriving. That's what the next 24 hours are bringing, alongside the clarity. Not just the emotional confirmation that it's time to go, but the material means to actually go. A financial opening, a crack in the wall that has been separating you from the practical ability to make this transition. It might come in the form of money you weren't expecting. an offer, a settlement, a return, a payment, a discovery that something you own or are owed is worth more than you thought. It might come in the form of a financial restructuring that makes the cost of departure suddenly manageable where it previously seemed prohibitive. It might come in the form of information about a resource or an opportunity that you simply didn't know existed, something that was available to you all along but invisible because you weren't looking in the right direction or asking the right questions. Whatever form it takes, the financial shift is designed to do one very specific thing. It's designed to remove the last legitimate excuse you have for staying. I say legitimate because the emotional excuses, the guilt, the loyalty, the fear of hurting someone, the fear of the unknown, those are real, but they're not legitimate in the sense that they reflect truth. They reflect conditioning. They reflect the part of you that was trained to prioritize other people's comfort over your own evolution. The financial obstacle was different. The financial obstacle was practical. It was rooted in real math, real numbers, real constraints that existed independently of your emotional state. And the universe, understanding that the emotional barriers would dissolve the moment the practical barrier was removed, has been working behind the scenes to address the practical barrier first. Because once the money piece is handled, once you can no longer say, I can't afford to leave, the only thing standing between you and your departure is your own permission. And you're closer to giving yourself that permission than you've ever been. Let me go deeper into the dynamic with the first person because I think there's a complexity here that deserves more attention. This person is not a villain. I want to be very clear about that because the narrative I've been constructing could easily slide into a framework where they're the anchor holding you down and you're the hero breaking free. And that framework, while emotionally satisfying, is incomplete. This person loves you in their way with the tools they have, within the limits of their own emotional architecture, which is constrained in ways that aren't entirely their fault. They didn't choose their limitations any more than you chose your expansion. They didn't wake up one morning and decide to be the person who needs you small. They became that person through the same kind of invisible, incremental process that turned you into a person who is ready to grow beyond the space you've shared. You evolved in one direction. They evolved in another. And the divergence has created a tension that neither of you caused, but both of you feel a tension that cannot be resolved by one of you adjusting to fit the other, because the adjustment required would be a betrayal of self either way. The compassion I want you to carry for this person is not the compassion that makes you stay. It's the compassion that allows you to leave without cruelty, without scorching the earth behind you, without the parting shot or the detailed accounting of every way they fell short. They fell short. You know it. They might even know it. But the falling short was not intentional, and it was not complete. And there were moments, real moments, genuine moments, where this person gave you everything they had. The everything just wasn't enough. Not because the everything was small, because you needed something they weren't built to give. And there's no fault in that. There's only truth. And the truth is that staying with someone whose best is your barely enough is not an act of love. It's an act of mutual diminishment. They deserve someone whose barely enough is their everything. And you deserve someone whose everything matches yours. The leaving serves you both, even if only one of you can see that right now. The second person, the one connected to your next chapter, is carrying an energy that I want to describe because I think it's going to help you recognize them when the moment of connection occurs. This person has a quality of stillness about them that stands in contrast to the noise of your current situation, not passivity, stillness, the kind that comes from someone who is rooted, grounded, sure of themselves in a way that doesn't require external validation or constant reassurance, where the first person's energy often feels like it's reaching for you, grasping, pulling, needing. This second person's energy simply exists. It's there, it's warm, it's available, but it's not chasing you. It's not trying to keep you. It's not strategically positioning itself to ensure your attention. It's just present, open, like a door that's standing ajar without anyone pushing on it from either side. And that openness, that non-grasping quality is going to feel so foreign to your nervous system that your initial response might be confusion. Because you're so accustomed to love that clutches, to connection that clings, to relationships that require constant maintenance and management and emotional labor just to keep them functional, that a connection which simply rests in its own gravity might not register as real to you. It might feel too easy, too calm, too free of the dramatic tension that you've been conditioned to associate with depth. But easy is not shallow, calm is not empty, and the absence of drama is not the absence of meaning. This person's presence in your life is going to teach you something that you desperately need to learn, which is that love doesn't have to be heavy to be deep. That connection doesn't have to be complicated to be significant. That the right person doesn't ask you to fight for the relationship. They just stand in their own truth and invite you to stand in yours and let the space between you fill naturally with whatever wants to grow there. There's a financial layer to this second person as well, and I think it's connected to the monetary shift I described earlier. Not in the sense that this person is your benefactor or your financial solution, but in the sense that their presence in your life coincides with and possibly catalyzes a new relationship with abundance. They might introduce you to an opportunity. They might share a perspective on money or resources that shifts something in your understanding. They might simply embody a relationship with prosperity that models what's possible for you, showing you by example that financial freedom isn't reserved for a certain type of person, and that you, with your specific skills and your specific gifts and your specific history, are closer to that freedom than you've allowed yourself to believe. Now I need to talk about the mechanics of the next 24 hours because there's a sequence here that I think you need to be aware of. Something is going to happen, and it's going to happen fast. And the speed of it is going to require you to make a decision without the luxury of your usual deliberation process. You are someone who thinks carefully, who weighs options, who considers implications from multiple angles before committing to a course of action. And that quality has served you well in many areas of your life. But in this situation, in this specific compressed window of time, the careful thinking is going to be a liability, because the opportunity that's presenting itself, the convergence I described, has a window, and the window is not going to stay open indefinitely. It's going to appear, and it's going to be available for a limited period, and then it's going to close. Not slam shut, just quietly close, the way some of the most important doors in our lives close, without drama, without fanfare, with nothing more than a soft click that you don't even hear unless you're paying very close attention. This isn't the universe being cruel or imposing arbitrary deadlines. This is the nature of alignment. When multiple forces converge to create an opening, the convergence itself is a temporary state. The forces that align to produce this moment will continue moving along their individual trajectories, and the specific configuration that created the opportunity will dissolve into a new configuration that points elsewhere. Think of it like a combination lock where the numbers are always turning. Right now, in this window, the numbers are aligned. The lock is open. But the dial doesn't stop turning just because you haven't stepped through yet. And waiting for the next alignment, the next time all the numbers line up in exactly this configuration, is not guaranteed. It might happen again. It might not. And the not is a possibility you don't want to test, because the regret of missing this window will be the specific, persistent, waking up at 3 a.m. kind of regret that doesn't fade with time but intensifies with it. I want to talk about what you're leaving, and I want to be tender about it, because I think the spiritual narrative around departure can sometimes become so focused on the new that it disrespects the old. You built something where you are, not something perfect, but something real. You invested time and emotion and effort and pieces of yourself into this current chapter, and those investments weren't wasted just because the chapter is ending. The lessons you learned here are permanently installed in your operating system. The growth you achieved in this environment is yours to keep, regardless of whether you stay in the environment that facilitated it. The love you gave, even to people who couldn't fully match it, wasn't thrown into a void. It existed. It was real. It mattered. And leaving doesn't erase it. Leaving doesn't mean it was a mistake. Leaving means you've extracted every ounce of value this chapter had to offer, and there's nothing left to learn here that you can't learn better, faster, and more completely somewhere else. There's also something I want to name about the particular sadness of leaving a place where you were almost happy, not miserable, not obviously dramatically unhappy in a way that makes the decision clear-cut. Almost happy. Close enough to happiness that you could taste it on certain days, in certain moments, during certain golden hours when the light hit everything at the right angle and the problems receded into the background, and you could almost convince yourself that this was enough. The almost is the cruelest part, because almost gives you just enough to stay. Almost provides just enough warmth to keep you from freezing. Almost is the bare minimum dressed up in the language of gratitude and contentment, and you've been wearing that costume for so long that you've started to believe it's your skin. But there's a difference between almost happy and actually happy, and you know that difference. You know it in the moments between the golden hours, in the ordinary afternoons when the light isn't doing you any favors, when the problems aren't conveniently receding, when the truth of your emotional state sits in your lap like a weight you can't redistribute. In those moments, you know that almost isn't a destination. It's a waiting room. And you've been sitting in the waiting room so long that you've decorated it and called it home. But a waiting room, no matter how nicely decorated, is still a room you're supposed to pass through, not settle in. Let me address the financial element more directly, because I can feel your energy lean forward when I mention it, and that lean tells me this is the piece you need most urgently. The monetary shift that's approaching is not abstract. It's specific. There is a tangible financial development that is either going to present itself within the next 24 hours or that is going to be set into irreversible motion within that window. And when I say tangible, I mean you will be able to quantify it. There will be a number attached to it. A real, concrete, write it down number that changes the math you've been doing, the exhausting, middle of the night, how do I make this work math that has been one of the primary chains keeping you anchored to a situation you've outgrown. This financial development might surprise you in its source. It might come from a direction you weren't monitoring. It might involve something you had written off or forgotten about or dismissed as unlikely. Part of what makes this shift so significant is that it didn't come from your effort. You didn't hustle for it. You didn't strategize your way toward it. It emerged from the natural consequences of seeds planted long ago, seeds you might not even remember planting, actions taken in the past that are now bearing fruit in a season where you most need nourishment. There's a justice to it that goes beyond luck or coincidence. Something you put into the world, some energy, some effort, some act of integrity or generosity or faith is coming back to you multiplied. And the multiplication is arriving at precisely the moment when it can do the most good, which is the moment when it removes the final barrier between you and the life that's waiting for you on the other side of this departure. I keep seeing something in this energy that I want to describe because I think it's going to resonate with a very specific experience you've been having. You've been doing math, mental math, quiet, private, obsessive calculations that you run through your head at odd hours, trying to figure out if the numbers can work, if you can afford to make the change, if there's a way to restructure your financial reality so that leaving becomes possible. You've been running these calculations for longer than anyone knows, and every time you run them, they come up short. Not dramatically short, just short enough to keep you where you are. Just short enough to reinforce the narrative that leaving is a luxury you can't afford, that freedom costs more than you have, that the gap between where you are and where you want to be is measured in dollars, and the dollars aren't there. What's coming in the next 24 hours is the number that closes the gap. Not all the gaps, not every financial challenge you've ever faced, but the specific gap between where you are and where you need to be in order to make this transition. The universe is not solving all of your financial problems. It's solving this one, the critical one, the one that, once resolved, allows everything else to start moving, because that's how financial liberation works in practice. It doesn't usually arrive as a single windfall that erases every concern simultaneously. It arrives as a strategic intervention at the exact point of greatest leverage, the financial equivalent of removing a single stone that's blocking a river. And once that stone is removed, the water flows, and the flow creates its own momentum, and the momentum carries you into a financial reality that was always available but inaccessible because that one stone was in the way. I need to circle back to the two people because there's an interaction coming between you and the first person, the one tied to your current situation, that is going to be emotionally significant, and I want you to be prepared for it. Within this same window, you're going to have a moment with this person where the truth of the situation becomes undeniable to both of you. Not because you announce your departure, not because you deliver a speech or make a declaration, because something in the interaction itself reveals what has been hidden, a crack in the surface of the pretending you've both been doing. A moment where the mask slips and one of you, maybe both of you, sees the reality of what this connection has become versus what it was, versus what you both needed it to be. And in that moment, there's going to be a sadness that is entirely appropriate and entirely real. The sadness of two people who wanted different things from the same situation and tried very hard to make those different things compatible and couldn't, not through lack of love, through lack of alignment. That moment of mutual seeing, that silent exchange where the truth passes between you without being spoken, is going to be one of the most honest moments of your entire relationship with this person. Because finally, Neither of you is performing. Neither of you is managing. Neither of you is trying to make it work or hold it together or smooth over the cracks with optimism and effort. You're just looking at each other, two people who shared a chapter, and the chapter is over, and both of you know it. And the knowing is sad and clean and strangely peaceful, the way endings are always peaceful when they arrive naturally rather than being forced or fought or dragged out beyond their expiration. With the second person, the interaction in this window is going to feel completely different. If the interaction with the first person is a quiet exhale, this one is a quiet inhale. New air, fresh, unfamiliar, carrying the scent of something you haven't smelled before, a combination of possibility and excitement, and that particular nervousness that accompanies genuine potential, the nervousness of standing at the beginning of something whose shape you can't yet see, but whose energy you can already feel. This interaction might be brief, it might seem insignificant in the moment, but I want you to pay attention to it with the same quality of attention you'd give to a first sentence of a book that you somehow know is going to change your life. Not because the sentence itself is remarkable, because it's the opening line of a story that is. What I want to weave together now is the way these three elements, the departure, the two people, and the financial shift, are all actually one thing, one unified movement. One coordinated act of the universe reorganizing your life along lines that more accurately reflect who you've become, because that's what's happening. Your life, as it currently exists, was designed for a version of you that no longer exists. It was built by a younger you, a more afraid you, a you with different needs and different capacities and different understandings of what was possible, and that life served that version well. It provided what was needed at the time. But you've evolved beyond it. You've grown new capacities, new desires, new dimensions of yourself that the current structure cannot accommodate. And so the structure has to change. The people in your life are redistributing themselves according to the new design. The finances are shifting to support the new trajectory. And the departure, the physical act of leaving, is simply the external expression of an internal transformation that already happened, that has been happening for a while, that you've been feeling in your bones and your breath, and the way certain things that used to feel like home now feel like hotels, places you're passing through, places you sleep but don't live, places where your body goes through the motions of residency while your soul has already moved to an address your conscious mind hasn't been given yet. I want to speak to the fear that's sitting beneath all the excitement and the clarity, because I know it's there and I think ignoring it would be dishonest. You're afraid of what happens after you leave. Not the first day, not the first week, the after. The long middle stretch where the novelty has worn off and the reality of what you've done settles in, and you're standing in a new landscape that doesn't have the familiar markers you've spent years navigating by. You're afraid of getting lost. You're afraid of discovering that the new doesn't feel any better than the old. You're afraid that the problem you've been attributing to your circumstances is actually a problem you carry within you, portable and permanent, immune to change of scenery. What if I leave and I'm still unhappy? What if the thing I was running from is actually the thing I am? What if I get to the new place and find myself already there, waiting, same problems, same patterns, same me? That fear is intelligent. It's asking the right question. And the answer is both yes and no. Yes, you will bring yourself with you. Yes, some of your patterns will follow you because they live in you, not in your environment. Yes, there will be days in the new life when you feel echoes of the old dissatisfaction and wonder if the whole thing was pointless. That's the honest part. But here's the rest of the honest part. the part the fear doesn't show you. You are not the same self you were when you entered this current chapter. The patterns you're carrying have been altered by the growth you've done here. They're not the same patterns. They're evolved versions, lighter, more conscious, more responsive to your awareness. And the new environment, precisely because it is new, because it doesn't have the grooves and channels of the old patterns worn into its surface, will allow you to choose differently. Not automatically, not without effort, but with a possibility that the current environment has foreclosed because the current environment is so deeply imprinted with the old you that it keeps activating the old responses regardless of how much you've changed internally. Leaving isn't running from yourself. It's giving yourself a fighting chance to meet yourself in a context where the old scripts don't have home field advantage. The financial piece is going to accelerate everything. When the monetary shift arrives, and I keep coming back to this because the energy is so insistent about it. When it arrives, it's going to do something to your nervous system that goes beyond practical relief. It's going to give you a visceral, body-level experience of being supported by something larger than your own effort. You have been operating under the assumption, held so deep that it's practically subconscious, that you are alone in this, that the only resources available to you are the ones you generate through your own labor, that the universe, for all its spiritual rhetoric about abundance and provision, has not actually been providing for you in any tangible way. And that assumption has kept you locked in a scarcity posture, always bracing, always calculating, always prepared for the worst, because hoping for the best felt like a luxury your bank account couldn't justify. The arrival of this money, this resource, this financial opening is going to crack that assumption, not philosophically, experientially. You're going to feel in your body what it's like when something arrives that you didn't generate. When the universe puts its money where its mouth is, literally, and that feeling, that bone-level recognition that you are not as alone as you thought, that the web of support extends beyond what your eyes can see, that provision sometimes arrives from directions you weren't monitoring, that feeling is going to reorganize your relationship with security in a way that no affirmation or meditation could accomplish. Because it's not a concept anymore, it's a fact. It happened. The money came from there. There's a message that's been trying to reach you, and I think now is the moment it's supposed to land. The message is this: your life is not a debt to be repaid. You do not owe your current situation your future. You do not owe the first person your continued presence simply because they benefited from it. You do not owe your comfort zone your loyalty simply because it kept you safe during a time when safety was what you needed most. Safety was a season. It had a function. It served that function beautifully. But the season has changed. And continuing to dress for winter in the middle of spring isn't wise or loyal or strong. It's just cold. And you have been cold for too long while pretending to be warm. I also want to address something very specific that I feel is going to happen today or in this immediate window that involves communication. Someone is going to say something to you, or you're going to overhear something, or a piece of information is going to reach you through a channel you don't normally pay attention to. And this communication is going to function as the catalyst, the final push. Not a dramatic push, a quiet one. The whisper that tips the scale after 1,000 screams failed to. Because sometimes the thing that moves us isn't the loudest voice in the room, It's the quietest one. It's the offhand comment from a stranger. It's the single sentence in a longer conversation that everyone else glosses over, but that lodges in your chest like an arrow and stays there, vibrating with a truth that your soul recognizes, even if your mind needs a moment to catch up. Listen for it. Be alert today in a way that goes beyond your normal level of attention, not hypervigilant, receptive, open-eared, open-hearted. Let the world speak to you and be willing to hear things you might normally filter out. The catalyst is coming through a channel you don't usually monitor because part of the universe's design for this moment involves surprising you out of your routine modes of perception. If the message came through the channels you're used to, you'd process it with the same analytical framework that's been keeping you stuck. It's coming through a side door specifically so that it bypasses the gatekeeper of your overthinking mind and arrives directly at the part of you that knows what to do. I keep seeing this image of two rooms. You're standing in a hallway between them. One room is behind you. It's lit with the warm amber light of familiarity. You know every corner of that room. You know where the furniture is. You know how the shadows fall. You could navigate it blindfolded. The other room is ahead of you. It's brighter but less defined. The shapes inside it are still forming. The furniture is still being arranged. It's not finished yet. And there's something terrifying about walking into an unfinished room because unfinished means uncertain, and uncertain means vulnerable. And vulnerable is the one thing your particular survival system was designed to prevent you from ever being. But the room behind you is shrinking, not metaphorically, energetically. The walls are closing in. The air is getting thinner. The warmth that used to comfort now suffocates. And the room ahead, unfinished as it is, has one thing the old room doesn't: space. Space for the full wingspan of who you are. Space for the parts of you that have been folded and tucked and compressed to fit the old room's dimensions. Space for the dreams you couldn't dream out loud because the ceiling was too low. The new room might not be cozy yet. It might not feel like home yet, but it has the capacity to become a home that actually fits you. And that capacity, that potential, that raw, unfinished, terrifying possibility is worth more than all the amber-lit comfort of a room you've outgrown. The departure is sacred. Let me say that one more time because I think you need to hear the word sacred. Not reckless, not selfish, not irresponsible, sacred. In the way that all transitions are sacred, in the way that every threshold crossing, every passage from one state of being to another has been ritualized and honored and treated as holy by every spiritual tradition that has ever existed. You are crossing a threshold, and the crossing deserves reverence, not the frantic energy of escape or the guilty energy of abandonment, but the slow, deliberate, fully conscious energy of someone who is choosing their own evolution and accepting everything that choice entails, the loss and the gain, the grief and the excitement, the ending and the beginning, all of it, held together in hands that tremble but do not drop. What I want you to carry with you from this moment through Mary's Angel Tarot and into whatever unfolds next is the knowing that the departure was always part of the plan, not a deviation, not a failure, not evidence that something went wrong. The plan. Your soul wrote this chapter with an expiration date embedded in the first sentence. The ending was always there, folded into the beginning, the way an oak is folded into an acorn. Everything that happened between then and now was the tree growing. And now the tree has reached its full height in this particular soil, and the next phase of growth requires different ground. You're not abandoning the soil, you're thanking it, you're honoring what it gave you, and you're trusting that the new ground, wherever it is, whatever it looks like, has the specific nutrients that the next stage of your becoming requires. The two people, the departure, the money, the next 24 hours. All of it is converging into a single invitation, an invitation to trust yourself more than you trust your fear. To believe in your own readiness more than you believe in your own inadequacy. To step forward into uncertainty with the faith that the ground will meet your foot, because it always has. Every single time you've taken a step you weren't sure about, the ground was there. It didn't always look like you expected. It didn't always feel stable in the first moments, but it held. And it will hold again. You're not falling, you're flying. And the difference between the two is not altitude, it's intention. Falling is what happens when the ground disappears beneath you without your consent. Flying is what happens when you choose to leave the ground behind. Choose it today, in the next 24 hours, with your whole heart and your trembling hands and your brave, aching, ready, terrified, magnificent spirit. Choose the room with the space. All right. Thank you so much for watching Mary's Angel Tarot. Take care of your energy, and I'll see you in the next reading. Bye.